I'm not going to talk about fares apart from accepting that they are complex. I am going to talk about how it affects the old and disabled community, but particularly the old, which is a rising number of people travelling, how difficult it is for people not as IT savvy to access the system anyway. Sitting here today, and I'm relatively IT savvy for my age group. I'm into most of the things, but many of my brothers and sisters, to use an old-fashioned term, many old people are not IT savvy in any way, and they get in a hell of a muddle. You try to find out, for example, I had one look, there's a saver/super saver. A simple concept, it says. It requires staggering levels of comprehension. You can't find out about it unless you're online. Not everybody is email connected. So many older people are completely disadvantaged from that, and they can't get involved in that. It is, I don't want to knock information technology. It has to be the way forward, and it's good. And it is indeed a saviour to some. It is wonderful for many people. Many younger people, certainly younger disabled people, have found it an enormous benefit that it enables them to get into the system and to do things. But it's Marmite in many ways. I've got, some people love it and work with it, and some people can't work with it at all. I've got friends who bore me silly with it. They talk about them, well, I say a pox on their apps and their pop-ups and their drop boxes and their Twitters and their Facebooks, Clouds and Google. I wrote this down. I heard one talk about his zippy process. Well, most old people travelling, the zippy process is when you go into the toilet if it's open. So there is this big gap in the sort of people that we're dealing with, and you need, or we need, as I feel part of this industry, we need to make certain that we take this rising market along with us. I'll give you a few statistics. There's 11 million of us now over 65. By 2037, which is what this conference is talking about, 1 in 4 will be over 65. One good thing for you lot is I won't be here, of course, but the other thing about it is that there will still be people, still older people, who will have the same disadvantages that older people have at the moment. Your cognitive ability starts to go down, your dexterity is less, your hearing is less, these things. You find it more difficult even though you're new. So I don't want you to imagine that the IT savvy now will necessarily take into retirement the same degree of IT savviness with the world that they find when they're old. So that's one statistic. There's going to be a lot of us. We're a big part of the market. You really want these people to travel. We've got some disposable income. If you want us to spend that disposable income, you have to encourage us to travel into the system. And yet we're moving along, and I've heard today the value of staff and all sorts of things. With 44% of the stations on the network now are unstaffed. 89% of the stations on the network are unstaffed at some of the time. So you have to start to ask yourself, have you got it totally right? Passenger Focus some time ago in 2009 and the D4T in their Railways for All scheme said the research indicates the presence of staff valued above all else. Now that's what you've been saying today. Lots of people have been talking about staff. Again, I say to you, have you got the management and political philosophy correct? There is a strong correlation between age and disability. 30% of people over 70 have a problem. They have this manual dexterity, reduced cognitive ability, the things that I've talked to you about. These things affect them. They don't make them necessarily disabled in the sense, but they become PRM, persons of reduced mobility, which are covered by the Equality Acts and other things. And while I'm talking about the Equality Act 2010, it says there should not be, pardon me, a provision, criterion or practice that discriminates. That's section 20 of the 2010 Equality Act. Now, although I've been a railway operator all my life and I know it's safe, to drive around. We're not talking about rules and regulations or union disputes on whether it's safe or not. But I would suggest to you, you have to ask yourself, is running an unstaffed train to an unstaffed station a provision, criterion or practice that discriminates for old and disabled people who find difficulty in travelling? I've not much time, so I'll give you just a few examples of the difficulties faced by the old, if you like. Ticket machines. Linda's touched on ticket machines and some of their problems. My problem with ticket machines is they're outside because the station is often locked. So they're outside, they're freezing in the winter, and the sun's directly on the blasted screen in the summer, and you can't see what's going on. And so they're a pain where they are, and there is no telephone, and there is some with a telephone, but it says telephone, it's only working when the office is open. Well, that's the time you don't want the blasted telephone. So there are limitations with that, which are complicated and want dealing with, I suppose. Because I'm trying to talk about what it is now. So, because if you don't get it right now, you're not going to get it right in the future. Talking of other complications, websites. You go on a website, and they're not necessarily user-friendly. The restrictions are there. You get an idea of what you want, and then you go back to that website, and you find that they've changed it, or that it's had a spring clean, or it's been upgraded, and so the technology is too difficult. So you have to remember, I think, and God knows nobody wants to stop progress, but the bigger the step forward by the innovator, the bigger the gulf you make between him or her and the user. You've got to make sure that people find it simple and that they understand it and that you make it a friendly thing for them to go. I could go on with lots more. I wrote all sorts of stuff. It's in the paper, but I won't do so because it gives people a chance. But what I will finally say to you is if you give older people inclusion in society and you allow them out, they will not be tomorrow's problem. We shall, in fact, be part of tomorrow's solution. It's extremely important that that interface is got right.